then, the Karmapas song, the young full number, some color than you, or the almost Java dancer. Number 7, I think, color than you, one number, and then Diane.
Today she will offer us the preparatory or preliminary for the empowerment of Chakrasamvara, which we will receive tomorrow. Chakrasamvara being one of the 3 main deities of the practice lineage of Karmapas, the other of which are Vajradhara and Jinasagara or Dojapamo and Jamajamsa.
And then the Dharma comes in the hanging, and then 17 Nana, and then a long number, and then Sherab number, and then Jidi Chamber, Jet, Haji, Jiji, Namja, Number, Lami, Gay, number, some there.
Our teacher, the Buddha, in his kindness, has taught various practices, various methods in order to attain or achieve the awakening of Buddhahood. One of these methods is known as the development process meditation, or Chirin in Tibetan, which would be the sort of practice in the course of which you would imagine yourself as a meditational deity, or a hidden deity, as they are called. The Buddha has taught various practices, various methods of such hidden deities in 4 Tantra classes, which are commonly known as the Kriya Tantra, Charya Tantra, Yoga Tantra, and the highest or unsurpassed, which is known as the Anguttara Yoga Tantra.
Yes, and then Vajradhara, Dharma, and some pets. And then our children, Roth, our children, and then back in Naropa, then here come and then Gole, Haji Saman to buy Maha Yoga, Imbuji, Doji, Yohin Holo, and to
these tantras have been taught by the Buddha, and their transmissions have been carried on until then eventually, centuries later, the great master and translator Karmapas came to India. He studied under various masters, and particularly under his master Narada for 7 years and 10 months, and he received from his teachers the transmissions of these various tantras. Among them, he received the transmission of the Father Tantra by way of Guya Samaja, the Mother Tantra in the form of Mahamaya, the Essential Tantra in the form of Hevajra, and the very essential tantras in the form of Chakrasamvara.
Magic, also over Magic legend, Nimbu legend, young also over the song.
Very generally speaking, Chakrasamvara or the tantras associated with Chakrasamvara are classified as mother tantras. However, within these classes, within this category of mother tantra, it pertains to the so-called essential tantras. So among these, again, as the very essence.
And then, Songju Samba, Dojin Himboji, and Songji Jamdin de la Soa Kami, Parkolo then the on, Nama, Jitanki, so on the stores, Sola Tabi, and Tamba Songji, Parkolo can cook the Yen, and then to the Saji, Mendi and Bomba. And him was down the Leo at the Nati.
The Bodhisattva Vajradhara was the one who requested the teaching and the transmission of the Chakrasamvara Tantra in the presence of the Buddha himself. And consenting to this request, the Buddha himself then manifested as the deity Vajradhara Chakrasamvara, and he taught the various types of Tantra. First he taught the root Tantra, which is called the Menje Bumba Tantra in Tibetan. Then he taught the Tantra, which summarizes the essence, as it is called, and then he proceeded to teach the Tantra of the single or of the essential yogini. So in this way, various Tantra classes were taught by the Buddha while he had taken on the shape of Chakrasamvara to the Bodhisattva who had requested these.
and Songi get it on the song Sunny, and Dagana, Protein Tonki, Protein Saraha here at Ingi, and Pacola and to get on them, Yam so long, and Sarah here and Protein one.
These tantras were then transmitted in India, and eventually many of the great Mahasiddhas practiced Chakrasamvara and gained realization through the practice of these tantras. First and foremost among them, the great Mahasiddha who is known as the great Brahmin Saraha.
And Protein Sarah, Papa Dubla now. And Papa Dubla Protein Shower now.
Saraha then passed on the transmission of all the Chakrasamvara tantras and instructions, etc., to the great scholar and master Nagarjuna, who in turn passed them on to the one who was to become the Mahasiddha Shavari.
And Protein Shower, Protein Ruhapala now. And then Protein Ruhapa and then color them to own to get on the Tom, and the young so fair.
Shavari then eventually passed these transmissions of the various Chakrasamvara tantras, etc., on to the Mahasiddha Luipa, who in turn caused these to spread further, who in turn disseminated them very widely.
So then Protein Ruhapa and you get Protein Narakava to the Telana.
One of the main recipients of the transmissions of Chakrasamvara from Luipa was Luipa's student who came to be known as the Mahasiddha Dharikapa.
And then Dharikapa, and then Protein Terupala now.
So Dharikapa passed it on to yet another Mahasiddha who was known as Nribupa in Tibetan, or Gantapa.
And then Protein Terupala, he Protein Zalin Dara to the Telana.
Yeah, it was then passed on to the next Mahasiddha in this line called Nanda.
And then Protein Zalin Dara, Protein Napupala now.
From there onwards to the Mahasiddha Napupa or Krishnapada.
And then Protein Napupala, and then Protein Narupala now.
And Napupa or Krishnapada then passed it on to the great scholar Mahasiddha Naropa.
At the Tongi, I followed them to the old on and one day that thing, and then
All of these masters of this transmission lineages and this lineage are known to have achieved their own accomplishments and their own realization predominantly through the practice of Chakrasamvara.
I took it there from the end, took it Luhapa, took it Terupa, took it Napopa, Sange, at them to go on Namatan, Zombies and the parents. And then some then get sending more boys and color them to get to one and drop out someone. They're that and then to get on them and not somewhere. Then Luther not some to the Luther to Napopa, some and then to get Namatan, Zombie and the channel.
Among these masters, particularly the Mahasiddhas Luipa, Gantapa, and Krishnapada, were essential in disseminating the Chakrasamvara tantras and the associated teachings, transmissions, and so forth very widely. Through the transmission of these three masters, these tantras spread far and wide, and innumerable beings were able to receive these transmissions, train themselves in the various meditations associated with these practices, and gain realizations through these. Therefore, therefore, whatever Chakrasamvara transmission is extant nowadays in this world comes through at least one of these three masters, and these three masters being so important in the transmission of the Chakrasamvara Tantra, they're always named together.
And it went in the Roba, Marbalotala now. Marbalotala and Belari Bala now. And it gave Gombo Bala now. Gombo Bala and Karmapas now.
The great scholar and Siddha Naropa then eventually passed on the transmissions of Chakrasamvara to his Tibetan disciple, the great translator Marpa Lotsawa, who upon his return to Tibet eventually passed all of these Chakrasamvara transmissions on to one of his main students, who was none other but the master of yogis, Jetsi Milarepa. Milarepa passed it on to the great Jegan Popa, who in turn passed it on to one of his main students, who was none other but the first Karmapas of China.
Karmapas person Yadam nothing, Yadam Song, Yadam Mandra, I didn't know him, then two Langa, Homo Langa, Roma Langa, some Jibado Langa, Darling Langa, nothing,
The first Karmapa Sherab was known to have practiced mainly 5 Yidam deities. They were the main focus of his practice, and he practiced each of these 5 Yidam deities in the 5 deity mandala, which means the main deity is surrounded by 4 attending deities. These were the 5 deity mandala of Chakra, the 5 deity mandala of Vajradhara, the 5 deity mandala of Tara, the 5 deity mandala of Vajradhara, and the 5 deity mandala of Hayagriva. These 5 practices were the main focus of Drime Chenpa's first Karmapas meditation practice.
And then you go back to something, and then come up to something like Combo Murala, Penny, and then Romano, he goes and then come up to something, Combo Murala, look, you think it's like Johnny. He gets then he has nothing, he gets no need, he has the horror that took in it.
Following the direct advice of his teacher Karmapas, Drime Chenpa the first Karmapa then went to a place in Tibet known as Karmapas, where he meditated intensively for the duration of 17 years. And during this duration of time, he focused mainly on Chakra practice. It was told to him by his teacher that the most important among these 5 practices would be that of Chakra, and doing so, accordingly, he achieved accomplishment and realization predominantly based on that practice.
And Karmapas doesn't have any ginseng, congregation, and that's it. On drop out of Karmapas in the on the map, everyone do. We come up to do the dodgy part of it, and then also down on the map, and we pay it.
The first Karmapa Drime Chenpa then passed the transmissions of these 5 types of deities and mandalas on to his main student, Rinpoche, who passed them on to his students, Vajradhara, Pomdrakpa, yes, the Bodhisattva Pomdrakpa, and who passed it then on to the second Karmapa, Karmapakshi, etc., and so forth, for all the lineage holding masters of our tradition, until they were eventually received by His Holiness the previous 16th Karmapa, Ranjang Rikpa-Dorji.
And the Karmapas also Rikpa-Dorji, Ranjang Rikpa-Dorji, Jinzin Nama, yeah, Yaji Shama Rinpoche, Sudha Rinpoche, Yangha Rinpoche, some Dasa Rinpoche, Nama Yara, and Honze, one who Dharma, Tamki, Nangzewai. That taken on, I think, for the Maranga, the only Kani, then come up with any toy. Don't want it, Honze, what? Honze, did it on the Margalo to get in there, and then did it on the Kid and then substitute Honze. Taken on a Malu did it just once, so I don't know.
His Holiness the previous 16th Karmapa, Ranjang Rikpa-Dorji, then eventually passed these transmissions on to his own heart sons or lineage holders. That happened when His Holiness resided in his Drumtik monastery in Sikkim. He passed these transmissions on to the 4 heart sons, which are known as His Eminence Shama Rinpoche, His Eminence the Tai Sita Rinpoche, His Eminence the Jamwan Kongtrul Rinpoche, as well as His Eminence the Jalsak Rinpoche. This transmission, or these transmissions, were given in the course of the empowerments of the collection that was known as the Kajing Matsu, which among other transmissions contains a collection which is called the 13 types of Tantra, or the 13 classes of Tantra as transmitted by Karmapa the translator. On that occasion, Rinpoche himself was also present and had the fortune to receive these transmissions from His Holiness the Karmapa himself.
빠봉라 팬니 대리 당원제 노두 뒤에 가라 까마바 오지 전에 그 빠봉라 팬니 그 당원제 소도를 보지 되는 생각 아 이거 말이야 그 당원제 당원제 이제 지나고 나요라. 이게 동원세 그래서 이렇게 활동 농주 이게 다 우리 신행들 까먹 하나 팬이 되니 그런 필요가.
In turn, the present Thai Rinpoche, when years ago he traveled to Tibet to his own original seat of Palpong Monastery in eastern Tibet, he gave the empowerments of yet another such collection to a great assembly of masters who had come there. This collection is known as the Dharma, and it contains the major practices and transmissions of the so-called 8 transmission lineages, 8 distinct lineages which evolved in over time. At this time, His Holiness the present 17th Karmapa was present among the recipients. He was very young then, and he received this transmission in its entirety from the present Thai Situpa. When His Holiness the present Karmapa, the 17th Karmapa, then eventually came to India several years later, he again received from His Eminence the Thai Situpa the transmission of these 13 types of tantras which were transmitted through the translator Mark. Again, after his arrival in India, His Holiness the present 17th Karmapa received the transmission of the collection that is known as the Rinchen Terze, the precious collection of Dharma treasures, which was collected by the first Jamnakanka Rinpoche. Karmapa received it in India from His Eminence the present Jalsa Rinpoche.
And Kaji Tsongka, Wan Zeta, Dangwan Zeta, Krenkin Ten Zeta, that then Odoman Tongi Tata, Ujin Doji to Gila Yoyo.
His Holiness the present 17th Karmapa has also received the entire transmission of the collection of tantras of the oral transmission, which are known as Vajradhara, from His Eminence the Thai Rinpoche. In this way, His Holiness has presently received 3 of these major 5 collections in their entirety. The Kajringatsu, the so-called Dangatsu, which contains the teachings and transmissions of the 8 transmission lineages, as well as the Rinchen Terze, which is the precious collection of Dharma treasures. In this way, so far he has received all of these and the instructions and oral transmissions which go along with it.